I wish I could tell you we could prevent the coming destruction. We cannot.
I had this idea to do a modern retelling of Noah's Ark. That was my original idea. And at that time, it was not really fully a disaster movie, but then we discovered there's like one theory in the 50s, Earth crust displacement, which would lead to a global flood. And that was naturally, came with a lot of disaster scenarios.
Every culture has this idea. Every civilization at some point had this idea that when society doesn't function anymore, when things go wrong, that there will be a big flood and some people will get a second chance.
I am very sure that everything that is shown in the movie 2012, like magnetic reversals, tsunamis, earthquakes and volcanoes bursting out, they will happen in 2012.
We said, okay, we need a global flood of biblical proportion. What could cause Earth crust displacement? What theories are out there would make this, at least for a film, feasible?
We definitely need a little help there, and we found a fantastic geology professor at USC, Professor Platt.
We talked about it, from all sides, and I was trying to sort of see a way of making it possible, or at least believable.
He constantly was like, that's impossible, guys, but, maybe if this happened and that happened.
Somehow amongst us we came up with this idea that if you changed the neutrino flux from the sun and maybe changed the type of neutrino that came from the sun, you might be able to put extra heat into the interior of the Earth. And if it happened in the right way, you could cause enough melting at depth that the outer part of the Earth might become essentially detached from the rest of the planet and might move around.
What's wrong?
The Earth's crust is destabilizing.
Well, fancy machines, the Mayans saw this coming thousands of years ago.
And on top of that, during the writing process, we became aware of the phenomenon called 2012. That a lot of people believe, because the Mayan calendar ends, that there will be the world ending. And we found this so intriguing and interesting, that we'd kind of use this more or less as the starting point for this story.
The date for the end of the Mayan calendar is December 21, 2012. And it's not so much what the Mayan calendar doesn't predict what's going to happen. The Mayan calendar just predicts that's the end of time.
The Mayans predicted it, as well as a number of other ancient religions. But among scientists, there is research that has been done which, under certain circumstances, there will be natural disasters by virtue of what's happening in the Earth's core. But like most of Roland's movies, they're a little bit science fiction and they're a little bit science fact.
Well, actually, the starting off point for my research into this had nothing to do with any calendar. One day late in 2004, scientists came to me and said that the sun is in turmoil. I went to NASA and European Space Agency websites and saw that the sun was indeed behaving more tumultuously, having larger explosions, and was doing things it was not predicted to do. And the next climax of this solar activity was, by consensus among astronomers, 2012. So one night, I just, on impulse, Googled 2012, and fell down this rabbit hole of New Age interpretations and philosophies. Underneath it all lay some really good, strong, ancient Mayan astronomy. Just because it's ancient doesn't mean it's not science.
The classical Maya were a very sophisticated civilization that developed in Mexico and Guatemala from the 2nd to the 9th century AD, before they mysteriously vanished, leaving behind these extraordinary temple complexes and cities that have been rediscovered over the last 100 years or so. They were incredibly precise astronomers, and that they looked at all these different cycles. They had maybe 17 different ways of following time.
It's really interesting from an archaeological point of view. I think we have much to learn about the interests of the Mayans and other ancient civilizations and their connection with astronomy and their connection with understanding the natural world around them. I'm fascinated with the idea of how they did such accurate calendars and accurate eclipse predictions when they were based on very little instrumentation, but incredible observation.
We're reaching the end of a 5,125-year cycle where this calendar kind of resets back to zero. And there are other cultures that kind of seem to share a similar time frame. For some archaeologists, this is just insignificant. It's like a speedometer kind of clicking over. But others have taken it much more seriously and believe that it correlates with the ideas that you find in the Popol Vuh, which is the Mayan creation myth saga, where there are these different creation, destruction, and then recreation cycles. 2012 could be this next cycle where there's some massive shift or transformation in the nature of human existence and the nature of life on the Earth.
It all pointed to 2012 as being either the end of time or the beginning of time, but a radical shift in what we can expect from life. And a consensus of the ancient wisdom was that 2012 would be the birth of a new era. And like any other birth, it will be accompanied by joy and blood and pain.
Extraterrestrial events have an influence on the environment of Earth. We used to think that was the subject of pseudoscience, and with good reason, because it wasn't based on science. But we actually have learned in the last 10 years about the importance of solar weather on the environment of Earth.
We have this concept of the Earth as this independent orb floating in space. No, we are so intimately connected with even the slightest variations in the sun. It's our energy source, and there is no other. So to try to figure out what a disruption in that connection might be like is really a study in every possible ecosystem. Yes, it might be tsunamis, it might be a solar blast igniting an earthquake or volcano. It's all at risk.
Every 11 years, there is a high in the activity of the sun. The Maya and the Egyptians were able to calculate the highs in the sunspot cycle. The Maya and the Egyptians were also able to calculate a big reversal in the magnetic field of the sun around every 11,500 years. And it is with this theory that they calculate the end of our civilization for 2012.
September 13th, 2005, the last day of one of the wildest weeks ever recorded in solar history. The sun went bananas, went nuts for that whole week with huge flares, unexpected and strangely shaped and configured ones. It was especially interesting to me because it was right after Hurricane Katrina and before Hurricanes Rita and Wilma. One of the stormiest periods ever recorded on the face of the Earth coincided with one of the stormiest periods ever recorded on the face of the sun. Maybe there's a connection.
More than 35 years ago, there was a Frenchman, Albert Schlossman, and he translated from the temples of Egypt a story from a high civilization that was destroyed by 3 cataclysms in total. He said that they were able to calculate the last cataclysm beforehand and that they escaped with thousands of boats. And my conclusion was then, if the previous high civilization was able to calculate the date, then the descendants, the Maya and the Egyptians, also must be able to calculate the next date of the next cataclysm.
Dr. Soumitra Mukherjee from India proposed a theory connecting solar blasts and seismic activity in areas of the Earth's crust where there's a lot of metal content. In other words, where there's metal to conduct the electromagnetic input. So the blast comes in, the crust conducts it, shakes, and there's an earthquake. In parts of the crust where there is high metal, iron ore and other content, those parts of the crust are more susceptible to earthquakes and also volcanic eruptions from solar blasts than other parts.
Well, the concatenation of events all coming together, this is the perfect storm, if you will. We can say the probabilities are very low, and indeed they are. The probability of the geomagnetic reversal of the magnetic field happening in anybody's lifetime that's alive today is very, very small.
Not only is that plausible, it's going to happen, and let me tell you how it's going to happen. Every 70,000 years or so, the North Pole and the South Pole shift. What happens during this period of magnetic confusion is that the whole magnetic shield weakens. Now understand, the magnetic shield's function for us is to protect us from solar blasts. The solar blasts that are going to next climax, remember, in 2012.
The probability of putting all of these things together is also very, very small. But again, I appeal to the idea that we need to understand it. We need knowledge.
My great fear is the domino effect. It's where one thing leads to another, and we plunge into chaos. Let me give you the prime example. In May 2008, the National Academy of Sciences came out with a devastating report showing how our electrical power grid, the grid that connects all of North America together, is beyond all measure vulnerable to the next major solar storm. That would, this is not in my interpretation, but in theirs, could well leave 130 million people without power for months, if not years. Not having electricity doesn't just mean not having the internet, it means not having water. Because the pumps that pump the water are electric pumps. It means not having fresh food or medicine. It means not having the basic essentials of life. That's the first big domino, which could lead easily to war, to bloodshed, to chaos, to really the rapid decline of civilization as we know it.
Kind of galling when you realize that nutbags with the cardboard signs had it right the whole time.
Pretty neat, huh?
Become more and more part of our popular culture. And so the question is, did they leave that for us as a warning, as a message? My hope is that they left it to us as a wake-up call. It gives us an opportunity to shift our practices on the planet, rather than just be kind of unconscious victims of fate.
Now, we can all be doomsayers and say that the Earth is going to end from any one event. Well, we don't know that. Of course, there's always ways to accommodate this, and we need to learn much more. But that's why it's so ingenious of us in the space exploration field to learn more about these things.
Why are we ignoring the facts that everything will end in 2012? Well, that has to do with the human mind.
It's interesting. It's such a fantastically unimaginable reality that it gets rejected. And so the idea of this great catastrophe coming in our lifetimes, and particularly in our children's lifetimes, it's too scary. So I'm like, let's watch a sitcom. You know.
Well, I am taking 2012 very seriously, and I'm working with a survival group to try to survive this cataclysm.
I believe in Carl Jung's ideas around the collective unconscious. And I think if this is this period of this transformation, it might also correlate with the Judeo-Christian apocalypse concept. The apocalypse literally means uncovering or revealing. So according to like a Jungian perspective, the apocalypse is an archetype that's actually constellating in the collective psyche at this point in time. But it needs to be, consciously mediated and understood. Maybe that's what this film will help to do. And maybe once we've kind of integrated those ideas and processed them, we don't actually have to live it out viscerally.
I think entertainment and science are different things that feed on each other. And certainly entertainment, a movie like this, can make us more aware of certain subjects. That's good. They can also convey misinformation. But the idea of being more aware of subjects is something that entertainment contributes to.
I hope that the Ronald Emmerich movie about 2012 will have a big impact on everything. If I say something, people will say, we don't believe it. But if you see in a movie a flood coming above the Tibet mountains, and they start wondering, well, could this be true? And then they will research it, and everybody will be aware of what will happen in 2012.
And if it's true or whatever could happen, who knows?